Welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Fear not, fellow short kings, they finally designed a recon tank especially for us. Jump into this tiny British FV103 Spartan Armored Personnel Carrier. Next stop, Crimea. We've seen the CVRT is playing a critical role in the recent Ukrainian offensive in the east. So what about its design makes it potentially well suited for this mission? It's so unbelievably small, it's what I imagine rich British parents give to their kids instead of Power Wheels. I want to examine how this vehicle's creation coincided with some of the most major changes in the UK defense industry since the end of World War II. And we're going to analyze the right and wrong way to deploy it on the battlefield. But first, you know my channel covers tons of military vehicles, which is why I'm glad to be partnering with War Thunder, a free military vehicle multiplayer combat game. It's fully cross-platform, meaning that you can play with friends for free on basically any modern gaming system you might have, including the PC, Xbox, PlayStation 5, and even previous generations. I really appreciate how accurately War Thunder models all of its vehicles. They've got more than 2,000 historically accurate tanks, aircraft, helicopters, and ships that span over 100 years of development, engaged with over 50 million players in a combined arms battle across more than 100 maps, locations that span from World War II until the end of the Cold War. One of my personal favorite features is the realistic physics when it comes to damaging armored vehicles. Imagine deflecting armor-piercing shells off the side of your Tiger II tank, just to land that critical hit on a heavy Soviet IS-2 and neutralize the objective for your team. Get yourself a huge bonus, including 500,000 Silver Lions, 3 vehicles, 50% experience booster, and 7 days premium account booster, and much more by registering for free using the link in the description. Play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox, and I'll see you on the battlefield. The reason for the creation of the CVRT FV103 Spartan ties directly into some big changes in Britain's history leading up to the 1960s. Right after World War II, the United Kingdom was nearly bankrupt from the wars. London wasn't looking too hot, and they were ending their control abroad in places like India and Hong Kong. They took stock of their situation and realized they could no longer afford to keep large garrisons of expensive soldiers sitting around or stationed abroad for security. This declassified 1957 British white paper explains this change that would lead to the CVRT FV103's creation. Here's where they outline their plan to shrink both their army and their responsibilities overseas. Quote, Britain's armed forces must be capable of performing 2 main tasks: to play their part with the forces of allied countries and to undertake limited operations in overseas emergencies. With the newly formed NATO guaranteeing security, the UK didn't really have an incentive to shoulder that burden anymore. There was this massive demobilization of the British armed forces from 5 million service members in 1945 down to 165,000 in 1963. All of this meant Britain didn't need a huge standing army with a massive tank formation. If this plan was going to work, they would need a tank with never before seen capabilities. So in the 1960s, right after this paper, they called for the development of the armored vehicle reconnaissance. It would be small enough to be airdropped, and it would have a small logistics tail making it cheaper. It had a 105mm main cannon and an anti-tank guided missile that was like a prototype missile at the time. But there was a big problem. It weighed 13 tons, which is about 3 more than they were aiming for, so that it could be airliftable. What is it that they say? Bollocks. So they scrapped the AVR concept in 1964. Back to the drawing board, gents. Britain's military vehicle and engineering establishment would use a new ultra-lightweight, higher protective aluminum alloy armor instead of steel. The new prototype would need to be less than 2.5 meters or 8 feet 2 inches high and 2.1 meters or 6 feet 10 inches wide to fit in a cargo plane. Oh crap! That means no proper tank engine could fit in this tiny engine compartment. Wait, I have an idea. Let's toss a literal car engine in there. That'll fix it. But not any car engine. How about the Jaguar J60 4.2 liter 6-cylinder petrol engine? Perfect. Now it looks and acts like a go-kart tank. Thus, the CVRT was born. It can reach a max speed of 96 kilometers per hour or 60 miles per hour on road, which makes it the fastest tracked armored vehicle troop transport in the world that I know of. The Spartan can travel 20 miles per hour faster than the M113 for comparison. It can climb steep gradients of 60%.
The Scorpion, the world's first all-aluminium armored vehicle, and it's British. Its lightweight construction makes it easily transportable by air.
Cheerio! Little did we know we'd never end up needing that airdrop capability. It turns out you can't get a dang cargo plane near the drop zone without it getting shot down nowadays. Now I'm gonna go eat a steak and smoke a cigar.
It had a crew of 3 soldiers and 4 dismounted infantry in the back. or riding on top if you're like the soldiers in Ukraine. With a ground pressure rating of 5 psi, it was less likely to throw tracks or get stuck in the mud like most tanks. This is no small matter. That's a huge life or death concern for armored vehicle crews who are one stuck track away from becoming a sitting duck on the battlefield. There are anecdotal reports of crew members jumping out of their CVRT tank and sinking knee-deep into the mud. Meanwhile, their CVRT is still basically walking on top of the mud just fine, like some kind of Jesus of armored vehicles. It was blessed with an outstanding 17.9 power-to-weight ratio and 320 miles or 500 kilometers of operational range. After passing its extensive series of tests by the Royal Armored Corps, it entered service in May 1970 and full production run in 1972. It took a dang decade, but we did it, and we fielded a tiny tank, recon vehicle thing. But how was this new vehicle meant to be deployed in the battlefield? It was meant to be a part of a coordinated team with the other variants, like the Striker version, which used the new prototype Swingfire second-generation missile with wire link, and the CVRT Scorpion with its 76mm cannon, meant for reconnaissance and suppressing enemy armor. But there was still a need for more firepower, which led to the 30mm L21 Raritan cannon that can fire up to 90 rounds per minute. This scimitar version can defeat any armored vehicle except for the frontal armor on the main battle tanks. There are some limiting factors here for this vehicle compared to, say, a modern M2 Bradley or BTR or BMP, because there is such a limited quantity of ammunition that the CVRT can carry, only 165 rounds of 30mm, which means you could chew through all of them in just a few minutes on a good day. So the weapon is loaded with clips of 3 rounds meant for single shot fire to conserve ammo. The 1982 Falklands War was 10 weeks long, and it was between Argentina and the United Kingdom. And honestly, this vehicle was well suited for it. The CVRT with 30mm and 76mm cannons were the only armored vehicles used by Britain in the whole war, and they only deployed 8 of them. So how many of these aging old vehicles does Britain have left in their arsenal to potentially send to Ukraine? According to an internal audit of Britain's military sent to their House of Commons, it says there are 478 Spartans in their arsenal and 452 are operational. But Britain didn't want to keep paying to maintain this old fleet of vehicles. They're trying to replace them. So they've been selling and giving them away to allies like Latvia, who acquired 198 of them. After former Prime Minister Boris Johnson met with Zelensky on April 11, 2022, the UK approved an order to deliver $130 million worth of 120 total armored vehicles, including 35 Spartans for Ukraine. That's enough for 8 platoons or 2 companies. It looks like a handful of the other CVRT variants were sent, including an ambulance and command version, bringing the total to 40 in eastern Ukraine. Or another way of looking at it is about 300 soldiers can be transported using these vehicles. But the major drawback here is the variant that they sent, the most firepower it had is only a 7.62mm machine gun. And even if they'd sent the 30mm version, its rate of fire is about 5 times slower than the BMP or the BTR that it might go up against. That's not to say it doesn't have its place, but it would be nice if they sent the better version. One fuel tank lets it go about 320 miles or 500 kilometers, although when you're in combat movement, the actual distance traveled will be much less because the vehicles are idling. According to the US Department of Energy, just large trucks burn between a half gallon and 0.08 gallons of fuel every hour that they're turned on. I couldn't find open source gas tank stats for the FV103, but the similar M113 can carry up to 95 gallons, which means if you idle for just a few hours during one day, you're eating up around 10% of your fuel capacity easy. Fuel isn't exactly cheap in Ukraine right now at just over $5 a gallon, and the government is urging citizens to kindly stop driving and ration fuel so that the military can use it instead. Paratroopers from Ukraine's 25th Airborne Brigade received the vehicles of this kind, and they're like an elite light infantry, and their skill set aligns perfectly with the Spartan and what it was designed for. It's the same kind of troops that the British equipped the Spartans with. From open source intelligence information, it appears like these Spartans were sent to Kharkiv front, where it's perfect for the fast lightning style attack. During an offensive that moves 50 kilometers into enemy lines, you don't want to worry about logistics, and the FV103 helps in that regard in 2 ways. 1, it requires less fuel, and 2, it can transport supplies like fuel and ammo. If the soldiers sit on top, it makes even more room in the hull. While they are traditionally meant to scout ahead and quickly return away from the front lines, the Ukrainian generals used the Spartans in a clever new way that surprised me. A tactical procedure that we've seen with the FV103 used is that the soldiers like to ride on top of the vehicle. This could be for a few reasons. We can count 8 people in this vehicle between those on top and the driver. It's possible they're trying to fit extra troops in the hull as well. Or it could be because these vehicles are relatively old versions that were designed prior to the more advanced engineering technology like V-shaped underbelly hulls that are designed to deflect blasts from below. The FV103 has not been given the multi-million-dollar armor upgrade package or the RPG cage to catch missiles. These look like the original production run from the 1970s that were sitting in a warehouse somewhere. The Ukrainians would say beggars can't be choosers though. Landmines are now just as great or possibly more of a threat than anti-tank guided missiles, so troops have a better chance of surviving on top possibly. During the assault in Kharkiv, Ukraine forces were able to find and safely recover Russia's newest generation of anti-tank mines, made in 2020, called the PTKM-1R, which jumps out of the ground and explodes with a 2.8 kilogram explosive on the top of the tanks, where it's most vulnerable and it's able to penetrate through 70 millimeters of armor. The FV103 likely has about 25 millimeters or 0.09 inches of armor thickness on average. In this case, a jumping mine would target all of the troops who think that they're safer riding on the top of the FV103. The PTKM-1R Russian mine can selectively attack specific kinds of armored vehicles, so you can set it to not hit the FV103 and instead wait until it senses a T-72 tank target instead. It uses sensor parameters like the type of noise signal and ground vibration to identify different types of armor to attack. This vehicle is no longer produced by Alvis. It's for a long time been made by BAE Systems. There have been a number of upgrades to this vehicle over the years to keep it up to date. In 2001, Thales Optronics, for instance, was contracted to retrofit some of the CVRT classes with thermal imaging and image intensification sights. It's unclear if those upgraded versions with these new optics were sent or not. If they were, then it would give the commander a valuable monitor and map display to see where friendly units are to help track an assault's progress. I really dig the FV103 Spartan and the CVRT family of vehicles. Personally, I like that they don't get stuck easily and that they're little speed demons. But I'm curious to know what you guys think in the comments section about the FV103 Spartan. If you found this video valuable in some way, hopefully I earned your like and subscription. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Thank you for watching Task and Purpose. If you get a chance, remember to support the channel by using the link in the description to download War Thunder for free and earn exclusive rewards.